Muslim Minorities in India by Jessica, Matt, and Nick.
For decades, India and the Arab world have had both good and bad relations. Islam has had a major influence on the nation as a whole since the early 700s CE. With Muslims taking up the second largest community in India and Islam being the second most practiced religion, behind Hindu, it has been woven into India for generations. But Muslims have definitely faced challenges in India since the very beginning. India has always had strong ties to the Arab world through trade. The whole west coast of India is covered with major trade ports that have been utilized by the Arab world for decades, even before Islam. Islam was first brought to India through these major trade ports by Arab merchants and traders. During the 700s CE, India was under the control of the Sind dynasty, but they lacked political unification within India, giving way to the Arab Umayyad Empire. In 711 CE, the Umayyad army entered into India, starting a long history of Islam in India. Many Hindus began converting to Islam in order to escape the organized racism of the caste system within India and to gain religious freedom. Islam became woven into Indian civilization and culture through literature, art, culture, and architecture. During the Muslim rule, India's economy flourished, which gave India the name the Golden Bird. Although the Arab rule was very successful in India, the Hindus believed they deserved control, starting a battle that continues to this day. By the late 1970s, India's Congress moved towards a Hindu majoritarianism. In 2014, Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party took office in India, leading to even more Muslim oppression. Muslims face discrimination in all parts of life, including education and employment. Under the Prime Minister Modi, a new amendment was enacted in India in December of 2019. This new act made religion a base for granting citizenship. The law gave asylum to non-Muslim immigrants from neighboring countries and pushed for a nationwide citizenship verification process. Here is footage of India's parliament debating the Citizen Amendment Act.
In this bill, they are targeting a community without naming it. It violates the basic structure of the Constitution. It is divisive and exclusive. It will destabilize our polity, and 18 to 20 million people will not trust us. It weakens the foundation of our culture, of our beliefs, of our ethos. It has consequences that you can't even imagine. And this is part of your political strategy.
Fear filled the Muslim community, leading to protests and violence throughout the country. Many organizations have spoken on the new amendment and the violence, such as the United Nations Human Rights Office described it as fundamentally discriminatory. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which consists of 57 member states, has urged India to put an end to the Islamophobia, while the United States has called out the Modi's government discriminatory practices and classified India as a country of particular concern.
Populism and nationalism are precipitating the oppression of Muslims worldwide. Populism consists of two things: anti-elitism and anti-pluralism. Anti-elitism is the idea that the elites in one's country are corrupt, that they're traitors, and that they're intentionally selling out the real people of their country. Anti-pluralism is built on anti-elitism. Basically, anti-pluralism holds that the opposition in one's country is illegitimate. So political parties that are against the populist do not deserve a seat at the table, nor do their voters. So typically, within a populist regime, you'll see that there's an attack, a full-scale attack on minority rights and democratic institutions. This is extremely dangerous for democracy, as we're seeing in the United States today. But it's also extremely dangerous for the minority community within that said country. Because at the heart of a populist struggle is the idea that real people are taking back their country. And lots of times, minorities are not included in that collection of real people. India's Bharatiya Janata Party, led by Narendra Modi, stormed into power 6 years ago, melding a Hindu nationalist agenda with populist politics. When nationalism and populism are coupled together, Political scientists call the movement national populism. Prime Minister Modi's election inaugurated the rise of national populism and the decline of liberal democracy worldwide. Modi railed against what he calls today the con market gang, an elite cabal of perfume-wearing, English-speaking, pricey wine-drinking politicians that oppose Modi's campaign and prop up his political enemies. Only 2 years later, Donald Trump would be elected President of the United States using similar tactics. While in office, Modi has worked toward executive aggrandizement and party-state fusion. According to Tarunabh Ketan, professor of public law and legal theory at University of Oxford, Modi has systematically undermined executive accountability to the Central Bureau of Investigation and the media. He has also compromised the impartiality of academia, banks, and the courts. Under Modi's leadership, India's democracy is weakening. Since the populist insurgency erodes democratic institutions, minorities have little recourse to defend themselves against the majority. Therefore, populism facilitates the oppression of minorities. According to the Constitution, India is a secular and pluralistic country, but these principles are quickly collapsing with the rise of Hindu nationalism under the Bharatiya Janata Party. According to some, Hindus are India's true sons of the soil, because their holy lands are in India, whereas the Muslim holy land is in Judea. Believing that Hindus are true sons of the soil is essentially a fancy way to assert the rather blunt and lowbrow opinion that Hindus are real Indians, whereas Muslims are not.
The Muslim minority within India is no stranger to discrimination. To understand where this issue stands in modern times, it is important to look back and understand where the origins came from. A common starting point for the bitterness between the two groups of people is the Muslim conquest of India in the Middle Ages. Another instance that furthered the divide was the British rule of India in the 19th and 20th century, and their concept of divide and rule. This systematically promoted divisions between Hindus and Muslims, which eventually led to the partition of India as a last-minute attempt for the British to assure there was never a unification of India. Within months, there was a war over Kashmir, and friendships, families, history, and tradition were all torn apart. In the movie Rang De Basanti, this British rule of India is portrayed. Additionally, the character Aslam Khan, a Muslim Indian, is shown having to deal with some of this discrimination. It can be best described on the example of Laxman and Aslam, a metaphorical representation of tense relations between Hindus and Muslims in contemporary India. Laxman Pandey, another character, used to be a member of a right-wing party which openly encouraged its followers to use violence against everything they considered non- or anti-Hindu. Aslam's situation had been equally problematic. His family claimed that India had never accepted them, Muslims, as its own people, and would prefer Aslam to only befriend Muslims. Finally, however, tolerance and unity triumph as Laxman leaves his party and bravely defends Aslam from a brutal attack of the police during anti-government protests. Although this dispute ended positively, that is not the reality. The emergence of the Bharatiya Janata Party has proven to be very distressing for Muslim Indians. BJP leaders have repeatedly made Hindu nationalist and anti-Muslim remarks in their speeches and interviews, which have encouraged and incited attacks because of the belief of having political protection/approval. This has been reinforced on a small scale when police did not intervene after a BJP-affiliated group attacked protesters. After gaining international attention from the United States, European Union, and United Nations, India first tried to play it off as an internal issue, and then later Prime Minister Modi made a statement claiming that Muslims have the same rights, but has done very little to reinforce this statement. There are many examples of violence between the parties as well. This includes the Gujarat riots of 2002, where Hindu mobs killed hundreds of Muslims, raped Muslim women, and destroyed Muslim businesses and places of worship. Also, a recent example is the New Delhi clashes of 2020, which broke out over protests of the Citizenship Amendment Act. The discrimination of Indian Muslims is very much alive and prevalent, and although many foreign governments and international bodies have condemned the discrimination, there is little being done and no insight for Muslims in India.
We feared the oppression of Muslim Indians will only get worse with time. During a visit to India, President Trump actually praised Prime Minister Modi for his religious tolerance. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris may levy stronger international condemnation of the BJP and Modi, but with Modi's bafflingly high and consistent domestic approval rating of about 75%, we doubt that any international pressure will cause the BJP to ease discrimination. If the citizenship verification process renders hundreds of thousands of Muslims stateless, it will take an enormous effort to ensure that they are resettled safely. We do not want a reenactment of partition, should these Muslims have to migrate unguarded.